Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to discuss my research. I'm within my second year, just starting my second year at UCF. So what I'm going to present to you today is a little bit of background, what I've tried to establish in the last year, and what I'm hoping to accomplish or start to accomplish over the next couple of years with this project. So to start off, I would really like to introduce myself a little bit more. I started undergraduate in exercise science and exercise physiology. I did my DPT at Creighton University, and then I completed a sports medicine residency at Vanderbilt Orthopedics. And it was in residency where I did a lot of rehab with athletes. I did everything in my power as a clinician to return them safely to sport, and then they would get re-injured. And this sort of conundrum puzzled me as to why it happened when they did everything right. And you as a healthcare provider did everything right to them. And it sort of led me into my research area of interest, which is how the nervous system changes from orthopedic injury. And specifically, I study knee injuries. So I did my Ph.D. at Ohio University in translational biomedical sciences with a concentration in clinical neuroscience. So for my research, I use functional MRI to measure indirectly brain activation during knee movement. I also use things like isokinetic dynamometry, which I'll show you a picture of, and I do a lot of dual task clinical assessments, which I'll also show you. I did want to take the time to introduce Grant Norte and Matt Stock as well. They co-direct the cognition, neuroplasticity, and sarcopenia lab with me within kinesiology here on campus. And so they are also experts. Grant is an athletic trainer by clinical background and has a lot of good experience in the acute management. And he also studies neuromuscular physiology. And then Matt sort of extends us into the aging adult. And so a lot of our research that we do in young, healthy populations extends into his work because we see a lot of osteoarthritis development, which is something he studies. In general, over the last year, I have pushed to apply for funding, and I've been successful in 2 of my 3 attempts. So something for me, I really wanted to apply to the NIH Loan Repayment Program. And so this is actually a project that I'm going to talk about today that is part of a new investigator award that we were given through the American Orthopedic Physical Therapy Association. So the hopes is that this project leads to preliminary data that then we can put into a larger R01 type grant proposal down the road. So in general, my research uses an interdisciplinary approach. I'm a physical therapist, and so I primarily have a skill set in exercise interventions, prescription, clinical function, and testing for muscle strength and muscle power or patient-reported outcomes, those sorts of things that you can envision physical therapists would be well-versed in. My research tools are more functional MRI and how that ties in with rehabilitation approaches. But something that my research sort of needs, or how it's the projection of it, is to include professions like cognitive neuroscience and psychology, as well as engineering and computer science. So we actually use a lot of virtual reality and trying to build paradigms within virtual environments to immerse our athletes into as therapeutic interventions, but also as testing mechanisms. We're very interested in biomechanics, and something that I have very little experience with, but would like to learn more about, is machine learning. And then right now we're actually collaborating with a cognitive neuroscientist, Kirk Erickson at Advent Health, for access to MRI. But then I'm also actively working with Dr. Mark Nider in psychology to learn more about eye tracking and dual task assessments, because this directly corresponds with my research goals. And so I just wanted to present that I actively have and I'm searching for more collaborations on campus, and that my research really does depend on an interdisciplinary approach. So in general, I study knee injuries, particularly the ACL. And so this is a ligament that's in the center of your knee that is commonly injured in sport when you're doing something like cutting or running or jumping. Females are at a much higher risk for sustaining the injury. After an injury, usually somebody has reconstructive surgery, and then they have to go through about 9 months of rehabilitation before they're able to return back to physical function again. An issue with this, though, is that 25% of the time the athlete gets re-injured, and over 60% of individuals actually develop knee osteoarthritis within 15 years of having this injury. So these happen in relatively young individuals, like 15-year-olds or younger. And so by the time these individuals are 30, they have very severe knee osteoarthritis. So that's why this is a concern. And so this is sort of, for those who don't know, the mechanism of injury, where the individual just makes a really cool play or they do something great in a game, and then nobody touches them. They just sort of plant or land wrong and injure their knee. And so we used to think of this as like a biomechanical issue, but now we actually think of it more as like a neurologic problem. And what we see in our patients on recovery is actually a huge difference. So what I'm showing you here is brain activity for knee movement in individuals who have had this injury and rehabbed from it compared to somebody who is healthy. Everything in red demonstrates elevated neural activity, just to kick your leg very simply, and blue is decreased. And so although I won't walk through all of these areas, you can appreciate that there's widespread changes throughout the brain that occur after this injury. And one of my goals is to better understand why this occurs and the influence that rehab can have on it, whether that's to mitigate these changes or if we need to apply other interventions to better use these compensations for safe return to play so that they're not at an increased risk for injury. So right now, neuroimaging has been limited to motor-only paradigms, which include like somebody is laying in an MRI scanner and they do a leg press or like kicking their knee. And only a single study has really used EEG during a dual task. And the problem with EEG is that there's limited spatial resolution. So you sort of have this cost benefit of using MRI, which gives you good spatial resolution of your structures, and EEG gives you better temporal resolution. And so hopefully my future research is going to merge these together. But for now, we mainly focus on MRI. And so acutely, we're trying to test the hypothesis that individuals after ACO reconstruction will engage in different neural activation during dual tasks, because we don't want to limit ourselves to motor-only paradigms, since sport requires a lot of dual tasking and cognitive decision-making. And then we're interested in what does this actually look like behaviorally. And we suspect that individuals after ACO reconstruction will have higher interference when you put them in an environment that requires dual task. So to do this, we're using functional MRI, and we have individuals do a kick within the scanner. And then we layer on this dual task component. So this sort of depicts a Stroop assessment. And then we also have a accelerometer that we attach to their foot so that we can see the speed at which their leg kicks with only a kicking motion, and then how fast do they kick when you add this cognitive layer on top of it. We also assess muscle strength using a biodex or an isokinetic dynamometer. So this is one of our PhD students, Ava, who we have strapped in here. But muscle strength loss is a huge issue after this injury. So this is a modality that we're able to longitudinally track that. And then I also use functional assessments of dual task. So after this injury, we typically use hopping to determine like power and stability. And so I was part of the lab in my PhD that started to integrate dual task assessments. So the peripheral lights give Hawan here a go stimuli. And so that indicates when he can start hopping. The light on the floor collects reaction time. And then the center light flashes 3 times and is like a working memory component. So these are at least an overview or outline of some of the tools that I use in research to sort of look at neural changes and functional changes after knee injury. Right now, our project is aimed to start this in a couple weeks. Hopefully, funds will be dispersed. And so right now, we are actually making the visual presentation that they will see in MRI at Advent Health. And we're right now trying to figure out how we get the accelerometer on the foot using BioPack to integrate with ePrime, which is our visual presentation system. I've never used either of these independently before, so this is like a huge learning curve for myself and my current PhD student. And then just briefly, my future research plans, this spring, I intend to submit an F, or this is a K, sorry, that's incorrect. I plan to submit a K, and this is so that I can better learn advanced neuroimaging techniques as well as EEG to integrate progressive dual tasks and advanced eye tracking within this area of research. And then with the hopes to ultimately pursue an R01 or Department of Defense funding. Thank you for your time, and I am happy to answer any questions.